Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Nityananda Prabhu ki. Right, so Hare Krishna, Hare Bol, Suswagatam. Yes, so our program is, lessons. We want to see what we can learn from Lord Nityananda, from his pastimes and examples he set and different things, points he would address. Yeah. Some of it's quite subtle. Some of it is very, sort of straightforward, you could say. It's all very interesting. And we're just sort of going here and there, back, forward, around. It's not like chronological going through the pastimes like that. But anyway, here and there, different pastimes, and different things we can learn. So first of all, just to set the scene, you could say, or just as an introduction, really, about the mercy of Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda, we discussed yesterday some things about his mercy in different ways, and special mercy, how he went out of his way to give Lord Chaitanya's mercy. So let me just read a little something. I will today be reading a few things here and there, different pastimes. So let's begin with a little reading. So, Lord Nityananda, wherever he would go, he would sing the song, Bhaja Gauranga, Kaho Gauranga, Lavo Gaurangira Namare, Ye Jana Gauranga Bhaje, Sehoi More Pranare. Worship Gauranga, chant the name of Gauranga, take the mercy of Gauranga. Anyone who worships Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that person is my life and soul. Lord Nityananda, that's how he feels. So he'd go around and he'd approach people. Sometimes with Haridas Thakur, sometimes just himself or with some other devotees, but that was his basic mood. He would plead in this way wherever he would go. And if someone was so hard-hearted that even though Nitai, who is the embodiment of divine love and compassion, even though Nitai was begging, take the name of Gauranga, take the name of Krishna, if they still would refuse, then the Supreme Godhead, in the form of Nityananda, would get on his hands and knees and beg, please, I beg you, do not reject me. Do not spoil your human life. Take the name of Gauranga. Worship Gauranga. If they would still refuse, the Lord would prostrate himself on the ground, rolling in the dust, touching their feet, and he would plead with them with tears in his eyes, saying, do not spoil your human life. I beg you, I plead with you, I'll do anything. I'll eternally be your servant, but please chant the holy names. In this way, there's never been any incarnation of God who has ever manifested such mercy. Lord Nityananda is such a person that there is quite a bit more detail about Lord Nityananda in Chaitanya Bhagavat than Chaitanya Charitamrita. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? All right. Because Vrindavan Das Thakur, the author of Chaitanya Bhagavat, he was a disciple of Lord Nityananda, direct disciple, I think last disciple. Anyway, he was a disciple. So he had a special connection with, like a very focused connection with Lord Nityananda, and therefore you find just more information and pastimes and so on. But still, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's definitely, a fair amount, a certain amount of information. And I thought we could begin now just by touching a little on that. Chaitanya Charitamrita and what is explained there. In the Adi Leela, the fifth chapter of the Adi Leela, it's about the glories of Lord Nityananda. And it's very detailed and philosophical. But towards the end of the chapter, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami tells his own story, at least part of his story, how he ended up going to Vrindavan and settling there and ultimately compiling Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, his place is a village called Jamatpur. Jamatpur. Tell me, how many of you have been to Jamatpur? I've been there. Couple. Okay. Jamatpur. If you go to Katwa, and then you go on, I think, to Jajigram, like the next small settlement, then you turn off to the south, or the north, no, to the north. You turn off, and then at least when the last time I went there, which was a good few years ago, I must admit, it's a real drive. You've not done it? It's a drive you will not forget for a while. It's a real, specialist Indian drive. You've got to have a vehicle which can take it a bit. Anyway, you wind along and around and up and down and back and forth, and then you end up in this little village called Jamatpur. And that's, as far as I'm aware, that's where he appeared. It's definitely where he was living at the time. That's his place, Jamatpur. It's well worth a visit. When I was there last, they had his pair of shoes, and what's left of his pair of shoes? It's just, they're wooden sandals, and there's just a few pieces of wood. Yeah. Anyway, so Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was there in Jamatpur. And there in Jamatpur, there was a devotee named Minakaitan Ram Das. So this is all described there in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila, 5th chapter, from what? It's about verse 156. Yeah. Sri Chaitanya say Krishna, Nityananda Ram, Nityananda Purna Kare, Chaitanyera Kam. So, Lord Chaitanya is the same Lord Krishna, and Lord Nityananda is Lord Balaram. Lord Nityananda fulfills all of Lord Chaitanya's desires. And I'll just read a couple of verses, just a couple of verses here. Because, he's really, it's very deeply heartfelt. It's amazing. The ocean of Lord Nityananda's glories is infinite and unfathomable. Only by his mercy can I touch even a drop of it. Please listen to another glory of his mercy. He made a fallen living entity climb to the highest limit. To disclose it is not proper, for it should be kept as confidential as the Vedas. Yet I shall speak of it to make his mercy known to all. O Lord Nityananda, I write of your mercy out of great exaltation. Please forgive me for my offenses. So then he goes on to talk about Minakaitan Ram Das, who was, probably more, maybe a bit today, but more tomorrow, we'll discuss some pastimes where Lord Nityananda shows his real avadhuta nature. Real avadhuta nature is just really quite otherworldly. So, and his followers, they're often like that also. They're kind of in transcendental worlds of their own. And Minakaitan Ram Das was like that. So there was a festival there in Jamatpur, a Sankirtan festival. And Minakaitan Ram Das was invited, and he was there in the festival in a joyful mood of love of God. He sometimes climbed upon the shoulder of someone offering obeisances. Haribol. It's, you can recognize followers of Lord Nityananda. Yeah. And sometimes he struck others with his flute or mildly slapped them. When someone saw the eyes of Minakaitan Ram Das, tears would automatically flow from his own eyes. For a constant shower of tears flowed from the eyes of Minakaitan Ram Das. Anyway, like this, he was really a very, very, shall we just say, very special, extraordinary devotee. So the festival's going on, and the pujari, respectable Brahmin, came by and didn't offer him respect. So Minakaitan Ram Das became angry. Here I find a second Romaharshana Sutta who did not stand to show honor when he saw Lord Balaram. And then he'd just get into dancing and chanting and jumping and like that. So at the end of the festival, Miniketan Ramdas had you could say an altercation, if you know what I mean, an argument, more or less. Difference of opinion with one devotee who was there. And that devotee was the brother of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Yeah. And the brother of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya. He had great faith in Lord Chaitanya, but he didn't really appreciate Lord Nityananda. Yeah. Got to be a little careful about some of these things. We'll read a few passages here and there where it's pointed out how you've got to be careful what your attitudes are towards Lord Nityananda. Yeah. So what happened was then that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami chastised his brother for neglecting Lord Nityananda. Yeah, he chastised him. And that night, Lord Nityananda appeared to him in a dream. And Lord Nityananda, interesting, he had a glossy, blackish complexion. Sometimes he's described as being blackish. Well, here, this is Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sometimes he's described as being golden in color. He's very extraordinary character. Golden earrings. Any of you gentlemen who may like wearing earrings, it's bona fide. It's okay. Don't be in anxiety too much. Yeah. So, his face was more beautiful than millions upon millions of moons. And his teeth were like pomegranate seeds. So he was moving back and forth, right and left, absorbed in ecstasy, just chanting, Krishna, Krishna, in a deep voice. So this is in the dream of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So then Lord Nityananda spoke to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and complimented him, thanked him for chastising his brother. Yeah. Yes. And told him, my dear Krishnadas, don't be afraid, go to Vrindavan, for there you'll attain all things. And then he directed him towards Vrindavan, pointing out to Vrindavan. Yeah. So, in the dream, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami fainted and collapsed on the ground. And then he came back to consciousness and he says, that very second, I started for Vrindavan. And by his mercy, I reached there in great happiness. So that's some background which Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami gives his own story, you could say. You know, every devotee has a story. You have a story, don't you? How you came to Krishna consciousness. I've got a story. I can't tell you. It's too crazy. You'd either not believe me at all, or you just reject me completely. It's too bizarre, too bananas, yeah. So all glory to the merciful Lord Nityananda, by whose mercy I've attained shelter at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatan. So, I mean, there are things to learn from that. One thing to learn is you got to stand up for the truth. We're not just here to be diplomatic and please everyone and just be nice and everyone thinks we're nice. But we've got to stand up for the truth and maintain the standards of Krishna consciousness. And that's what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami did, even with his brother. When he understood his brother, even though his brother was like a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, but he didn't appreciate Lord Nityananda. So that was a real disqualification. Now, if you've read Chaitanya Bhagavat or heard some of Chaitanya Bhagavat, you would have heard or read different passages where Vrindavan Das Thakur expresses like concern about people who don't accept Lord Nityananda and who reject Lord Nityananda. And he really, he speaks strongly. Listen to this. Sri Nityananda is the original devotee of Lord Chaitanya. His tongue is the abode of Lord Chaitanya's glories, vibrating incessantly the sublime pastimes of Sri Gaurachandra. One can obtain full devotion at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya simply by worshipping Lord Nityananda. By the grace of Sri Gaurachandra, one can become lovingly attached to Sri Nityananda. Those who desire to overcome the material whirlpool and drown in the nectarian ocean of devotional service should worship Sri Nitai Chandra. Many praise my Lord, saying, Lord Nityananda is like Balaram, while others say, he is most dear to Lord Chaitanya. I hear various opinions about him, that he's a sannyasi or a humble devotee or an erudite Vedic scholar. People can say whatever they like and conjecture without inhibition, stopping at nothing. Some may even go to the extent of saying that his connection with Lord Chaitanya is not intimate, that he's just a menial servant. None of this affects me at all. I simply pray that his lotus feet remain impressed upon my heart eternally. And listen to this, devotees. I mean, I'm sure some of you are quite familiar with this sort of statement of Vrindavan Das Thakur. If you're not familiar, fasten your seatbelts. Yeah. After repeated attempts to invoke good judgment in all people, if some sinful lot continues to criticize my Lord, then I will kick them on their heads to save them from imminent disaster. Haribol. Enthusiastic. I don't think we should do that. But Vrindavan Das Thakur, he can do like that. So, it's a bit extreme. I mean, in terms particularly of our experience in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So, in the purport of that verse, this is Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adi Leela, chapter 9. That was verse 225. Adi Leela 9, 225. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati gives a really interesting purport. Really interesting. Please listen to this. This is something very profound. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta says, in order to permanently stop the continual irreverence towards the Supreme Lord by those hellish people who enviously criticize Sri Nityananda Prabhu, and to render them eternal benefit and good sense, the author is ready to kick them in the head by the statement of the most merciful Vrindavan Das Thakur to the staunch atheists. The transcendental goddess of learning, Shuddha Saraswati, displays the firm attachment of a servant towards her master, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, thus teaching everyone through illuminating words that although Vrindavan Das Thakur and other pure devotees who act and preach in his footsteps, although they're detached from those who are extremely uninterested in their own welfare. I mean, just try and appreciate the language being used. It's very strong. Those who are extremely uninterested in their own welfare, who are determined to run towards hell, and who are ignorant of the truth regarding Sri Nityananda. They means the devotees, followers of Vrindavan Das Thakur. They are nevertheless selflessly and causelessly merciful towards the fallen souls. While Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, who is a Vaishnava Acharya, the direct incarnation of Vyasadeva and servant of Sri Nityananda, while he enacts his pastime of transcendentally kicking, if even one particle of dust falls on the head of such a person, they will certainly achieve auspiciousness. In other words, their anartha nivritti, or freedom from unwanted things, is guaranteed. This exhibition of such great compassion by Vrindavan Das Thakur is beyond the imagination or intelligence of the foolish non-devotees, who cannot distinguish between what is favorable and what's unfavorable for their own welfare. So there you go, devotees. I hope you caught that. On one hand, I remember when I first read this, probably 30 years ago or something, and I read, I'm going to kick them in their heads a few times in a few places. And I was thinking, wow, this is really quite something different, isn't it? But then, more recently, means probably 10 years ago, I read this purport. If even that while the servant of Lord Nityananda enacts his pastime of transcendentally kicking, if even one particle of dust from the foot of Vrindavan Das Thakur falls on the head of one of those offenders, then they will certainly achieve auspiciousness. So it's not just that Vrindavan Das Thakur is sort of, kind of, what would you say, boisterous, energetic, dynamic, kind of heavyish, like cowherd boy, tough guy. Unlike the gopis they're pretty tough also, but they're much more gentle generally. It's very special. It's very deep. And it's really, there's a lot of mercy there, even in kicking. But like I said, let us not do that, okay? I remember 1973 in Bhaktivedanta Manor, we had just moved in, and there was one devotee, Nityananda Swami at the time, and Prabhupada was instructing him and a few of the seniors who were now based there at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and Prabhupada was saying, Rabhatanandan asked Prabhupada that, how will the preaching go on as Kali Yuga progresses? And Prabhupada one time said, yes, at some point it will reach the stage where the devotees will go door to door with guns and say, will you chant Hare Krishna? No. Bang. Seriously. So this devotee, he was kind of a sort of wild fellow. We were renting at Bhaktivedanta Manor. There was one field which we were renting out to the next door farmer. And Rabhatanandan Swami, he got into this, this is Krishna's land, all right? It's not your land, it's Krishna's land. So this farmer was driving on his tractor, plowing or something, and Rabhatanandan went up to him. You must remember that. You remember that? You don't? And he told him, get out. It's Krishna's land. And the fellow's paying rent. He's been using the field for about the last 10 years or so. So he just sort of brushed him off. So Rabhatanandan, with his sannyas danda, knocked him off his tractor. Hare Krishna. So that's what they call the good old days. But anyway, but still we should appreciate the transcendental mercy which is there for these people who are so, what did he say? Those who are extremely uninterested in their own welfare, who are determined to run towards hell. But the devotees like Vrindavan Das Thakur, they'll even try and help them. Anyway, that's a little something. That's a lesson. You can think about it. Think about it. Yeah, a lot of these things you got to think about and sort of digest internally. And because some of these things, in Krishna consciousness, just in general, some of these things are not obvious. They may appear to be kind of obvious, but they're not, they're subtle. There are subtleties, there are different perspectives. And sometimes Lord Chaitanya tests us in terms of Have you understood? What have you understood? How do you see things? There's what I'm going to tell you about now. It's an incident also from Chaitanya Bhagavat, Madhya Lila chapter 8. It's quite a bit of chapter 8 of Madhya Lila, Chaitanya Bhagavat. Lord Nityananda was staying at Srivas Thakur's place, Srivas Angan, just not far away. And Lord Chaitanya decided he wanted to test Srivas. Do you really appreciate Nityananda or not? So Lord Chaitanya went to Srivas. First of all, they're discussing some Krishna Katha and everything's nice. And then Lord Chaitanya said, listen, why do you keep this avadhuta? Why do you maintain this avadhuta in your house? You don't know anything about him. Who he is, where he comes from, what's his family background. You don't know. And Lord Chaitanya said, I warn you, you are being too lenient with him. Yeah. Too kind. If you want to maintain the good reputation of your family, you should immediately throw this avadhuta out. That's testing. Yeah. Throw him out of your house. Immediately turn this avadhuta out of your house. And Srivas Pandit, he passed the test. And first thing he said, my Lord, don't test me like this. It's not proper for you to test me like this. I know that this Nityananda is your personal expansion. You're the Supreme Lord, and there's no difference between you and Nityananda. So don't say these things. He said, even if this Nityananda was a meat-eating drunkard, and due to my association with him, I lost my reputation, my wealth, and everything. Still, I tell you truly, that I would never ever think of anything else other than serving his lotus feet. Yeah. So Lord Chaitanya, he hariboled. Hearing Srivas speak in this way, the Lord stood up and roared loudly. Yeah. And Lord Chaitanya said, what have I heard from you, Srivas? You have so much faith and love for Nityananda Prabhu. You have understood the truth about my dear most confidential associate. This has pleased me so much that I give you a benediction. So Lord Chaitanya gave him a blessing, Ashirvad, benediction. I grant you this boon, even if there comes a time when Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of fortune, becomes impoverished and she's forced to wander about with a begging bowl. Still, your house will never be afflicted with poverty. Everyone in your house, including your pet dogs and cats, will find complete shelter in my devotional service. Therefore I leave Nityananda Prabhu in your care so that you can look after him and serve him properly. What do you think about that? It's Hari Bol, isn't it? It's a mega Hari Bol. Yeah. No, truly. Yeah. Because, Lord Chaitanya is generally, but not always, but generally more sort of, what would you say? I don't know if you'd say peaceful or just not as avaduta. He has his avaduta moments, but not like Lord Nityananda has his avaduta moments. Just, really very extreme. But yeah, Lord Chaitanya sometimes he does like that, something extraordinary. I want to tell you another little story. This is from Chaitanya Bhagavat, Madhya Lila chapter 12. So you can look up these things if you want. Lord Nityananda staying at Srivas Thakur's place. And Lord Nityananda, and again, fasten your seatbelts and just brace yourselves. Lord Nityananda just came walking over to Lord Chaitanya at Srivas Thakur's house with no clothes on. Hari Bol. Yeah. Just smiling with tears of love flowing from his eyes and repeatedly calling out, Nimai Pandit of Nadia is my Lord. So, Lord Chaitanya, on seeing Lord Nityananda with no clothes on, Hare Krishna, seeing him, Lord Chaitanya laughed. And Lord Chaitanya, he was wearing some sort of turban. He took it off and, did the needful with that. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati says, whenever Nityananda would take off his clothes out of ecstasy, Mahaprabhu covered his body with the cloth that he had tied on his head. And when Mahaprabhu would do this, Nityananda would smile and express his childish nature. Then devotees, maybe I'm taking us a bit too far by. Anyway, this is from Chaitanya Bhagavat. Lord Chaitanya told Lord Nityananda, give me your kopan, means your underwear, your underpants. Give me your underpants. And Nityananda gave him his underpants. And would you believe, Lord Chaitanya tore it into little strips, and all the devotees gathered. The Lord said, give me a piece of your kopan. I have a great desire to have it. And because Nityananda, when he was on pilgrimage, he accepted as like a Brahminical standard to the principle of wearing brahmachari kopan, that type of brahmachari underwear. So he tore it, Lord Chaitanya tore it into many small pieces, personally distributed it to every one of the Vaishnavas and said, tie this piece of cloth on your head. What to speak of others? Even the greatest mystic yogis desire this. Simply by the mercy of Nityananda, one obtains devotional service to Krishna. Know it for certain that Nityananda is the full potency of Krishna. His characteristics are incomprehensible to the Vedas. So tie this piece of copin on your head with devotion, go home and worship it with great care. So the devotees did that. I mean, they tied it around their heads. Then Lord Chaitanya said, wash his lotus feet and drink the water. And Lord Nityananda just sat there smiling as they bathed his lotus feet. Some devotees drank 5 times. Some drank 10 times. And Lord Chaitanya personally distributed the water. Because here we see how Lord Chaitanya expresses appreciation for Lord Nityananda. After drinking that water, someone danced, someone sang, and someone rolled on the ground. Others roared loudly. So then, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, they dance together for a while. And then, after a while, Lord Chaitanya sat down, clapped his hands 3 times, and instructed the devotees. So listen to this, devotees. Anyone who keeps faith and engages in the service of this Nityananda actually keeps faith and serves me. His lotus feet are worshipped by Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Therefore, all of you show love to him. If a person maintains even a tinge of envy towards Nityananda, then he is not dear to me, even if he's a devotee. And listen to this, that if a person is touched by the air that is passed by Nityananda's body, Lord Chaitanya says, Krishna will never leave that person. If they're just touched by the air which has just touched Lord Nityananda's body. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in his purport says, subtle fragrance is spread by the air. The touch of Sri Nityananda's bodily fragrance makes a person's devotional service to Krishna so firm that the worshipable Lord Krishna can never reject him. So yeah, everyone was really very happy. Aj ke Anand ki jai. Yeah. Really happy. But there are passages like that, where Lord Chaitanya expresses appreciation for Lord Nityananda. And it is, you could say, it's really very extreme that Nityananda's position is so extremely exalted that, even for someone who's a materialist, they can be totally transformed. Well, so devotees, let me just have a look here. Let's go into an interesting little pastime. This is now the pastime. Anyway, the lesson to learn from that is to really take Lord Nityananda very seriously. You know, we sing the song, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Karo More, Toma Vina Ke Dayalu, Jagata Samsare. You know, it's a very beautiful song. But if you think about it, it's a little, on the surface, it may appear a little confusing, because Narottam Das Thakur says that Toma Vina Ke Dayalu, Jagata Samsare. Yeah. That except for you, other than you, who can be merciful in this world of birth and death? Nobody. But then he goes on and sings, what is it? Ha Prabhu Nityananda, Premananda Sukhi, Kripa Balo Kanakoro, Ami Baro Duki. So he says that Lord Nityananda is very merciful. And then he says, Daya Koro Sitapati Advaita Gosai, Daya, what is it? Tava Kripa Bole Pai Chaitanya Nitai. So in other words, Advaita Acharya, you are also merciful. But Lord Chaitanya, Toma Vina Ke Dayalu. There's no one else. But now there's also Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya. Then Ha Swarup Sanatan Rupa Raghunath, Bhatta Yoga Sri Jiva, Prabhu Lokanath. Then there's them. And you might wonder, you know, what's the idea that Lord Chaitanya is the only one who can be merciful? Yeah. The way at least, you know, an idea which has struck me, put it that way, and I sort of mentioned it, I touched on it a bit yesterday, is that these others, like Nityananda himself, Nityananda is not necessarily like an independently merciful person. Just, you know, he's just got his own mercy, and like it's got nothing to do with anyone else and their mercy, even including Lord Chaitanya. But it seems to me that Lord Chaitanya is the reservoir, like the original reservoir, and these others, they're all taking mercy from the reservoir and distributing it. And so that's also, you know, Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva. It's also their mercy. They're carrying Lord Chaitanya's mercy, but that's their mercy. Yeah. So it's an interesting point about mercy and Lord Nityananda's mercy. Because here and there you'll come across statements saying that, you know, don't think that Lord Nityananda just is an independent person. He's not an independent person. He's merciful as a servant of Lord Chaitanya. And because he's so, as we mentioned yesterday, deeply convinced and absorbed in his appreciation for the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and his service as a devotee of Lord Chaitanya, that he makes it his mission to be merciful like Lord Chaitanya. And even we mentioned yesterday, Bhaktivinoda Thakur made the point that, and actually I was reading something today about Prabhupada was saying about ISKCON devotees, being even more merciful than Lord Chaitanya. So, yeah, Lord Nityananda in his mood as a devotee of Lord Chaitanya, because, these things like mercy, there's actually no limit to it. You don't reach the end of it, and that's it, and that's the end, and Haribol. No Haribol. It's all right. But the mercy, just like the love, we read of, like in the 4th chapter of the Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, how there's a competition between Krishna and the gopis, and their love increases, Lord Krishna's love increases, that stimulates the gopis, so their love increases, and that stimulates Krishna, and his love increases, and that stimulates the gopis, and their love increases, and there's actually no end to it. So similarly with mercy, there's no end to it. And therefore Lord Nityananda can be more merciful than Lord Chaitanya in distributing Lord Chaitanya's mercy. You could say, it's one way of putting it, at least. Anyway, when Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, which was it was around Makara Sankranti, I think, a few weeks ago. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas in Katwa, and Lord Nityananda went with him, and a couple of others went with Lord Chaitanya to Katwa. So they were there, and then, long story, but short, then eventually Lord Nityananda went with Lord Chaitanya to Jagannath Puri, and he was with Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri for some time, for some years, actually. But at some point, Lord Chaitanya instructed Lord Nityananda to go back to Bengal and to preach the Namahata movement, really. Namahata movement, Harinam Sankirtan movement. So Lord Nityananda, he went, and he took with him some of his team. And like I mentioned, his team, the associates of Lord Nityananda, they're really quite like him. Very super spontaneous and just, like, wow. I was listening to Jayapataka Maharaj telling the story of the man who liked the peanuts. Did you hear that? It was a good one, yeah. He really liked the peanuts. It was just, wow, peanuts. Wow. So these followers of Lord Nityananda, they are like Lord Nityananda. They are really like, wow. Just highly transcendentally emotional. So they went from Puri. Actually, they went to Panihati. That's where they went to. Then later they went to Navadvip. Some weeks later or so. But to get from Puri to Panihati, if you know where Panihati is, sort of kind of Calcutta or something like that, northern Calcutta. It's not so far, but it took them weeks. And they were real characters. This Miniketan Ramdas I mentioned, he was a character. He would go into the mood of Krishna and stand in the threefold bending form with a flute in the middle of the road and just stand there for hours in the middle of the road. There's another one, his name's Gadadhar Das. Not Gadadhar Pandit, but Gadadhar Das. So he's one of Lord Nityananda's associates. And he would go into the mood of Srimati Radharani and put on a sari and have a pot of yogurt on his head and go around offering to people. Would you like to buy some yogurt? But in a more wow sort of way. Yeah. And then there was one, Purandara Pandit, he is Angada in Ram Leela, and he would climb trees right to the top and then jump off the top of the tree. And they were all in the mood of cowherd boys. You know, these cowherd boys, they're tough young guys. In Krishna Leela, you got these cowherd boys, and they go out with Krishna herding the cows, but then after a few hours at some point during the day, Krishna leaves them and goes to join the gopis, maybe at Tirkadamba or somewhere around. And the cowherd boys, because they're tough young boys. And you know, I assume you know what tough young boys think about girls. These girls. And so they would discuss when Krishna would go, why did he go to those girls? What sort of fun can you have with girls? No, they can't wrestle. They can't run so fast. They're not good at fighting. They cry a lot. What does he want to associate with these girls for? So this is the cowherd boys. Because they're tough young boys. Yeah, they're tough young boys. So these associates of Lord Nityananda, they're like that. And they'd be going with kirtan the whole way. And they would just get into a kirtan and ask someone, which road do we take to the Ganges? And they'd say, just go this way, and then that way, and then another way. But they would just go. And after a couple of hours, they'd stop someone else. Is this the road to the Ganges? No, it's 20 kilometers back. Oh, okay. Turn around the kirtan, and away they'd go again. And is this, after a few hours, this is the road to the Ganges? No, it's up that way. So it really took them a long time. It took them weeks to get to Panihati. It's 500 kilometers, more or less, but it took them a month or a few months. And eventually they got there. So when they got there, they went to Raghava Pandit's place. Yeah. And I don't know if you've been to Panihati. Yeah. Raghava Pandit's place is there. So that's where they were. And they had a festival, devotees. They had a festival there for, how long? 3 months. They had a festival. Non-stop. Yeah. That's a real festival. Non-stop. Really. Just kirtan. And so, anyway, Lord Nityananda sat on the deity throne, like the throne for the Shalagram Shila, moved Shalagram Shila aside, sat on the throne. There's a lesson you can learn. Not a good idea to do that. Yeah. But he did that because he's Lord Nityananda. They brought hundreds of pots of Ganges water, because that place is more or less, it's like 25, 50 meters from the Ganges. And he asked Raghava Pandit, I want a garland of Kadamba flowers. And Raghava Pandit said, it is out of season. And Lord Nityananda said, just go and look in the garden. And so Raghava Pandit went out, and there was one lemon tree, but it was full of Kadamba flowers. So they made a really nice garland of Kadamba flowers. And then there was the smell of dona flowers, and I'm not familiar with that. Are you familiar with dona flowers? Some sort of fragrant flower from Puri area. And Lord Nityananda said, yes, Lord Chaitanya has come from Puri. Yeah. So Lord Chaitanya came, and then the kirtan began. And some of the devotees were climbing trees, walking on the branches, walking on the twigs. But even the twigs did not break. Yeah. So others put their arms around the tree trunks and uprooted the trees. No, big trees, you need to use both arms. So he was there for 3 months, and all the village children came and took part. After 3 months, well, you've all heard of chanting, dancing, and feasting. This was chanting, dancing, and fasting. They didn't eat for 3 months. And the children of the village were there. And the children would uproot big trees and just roar, I'm a cowherd boy. And when they realized they hadn't eaten for ages, Lord Nityananda fed each of them personally by hand. So, Lord Nityananda would think of different types of clothes and jewelry, and they would just manifest. Emeralds, pearls, rubies, gold. Lord Nityananda was wearing rings on all 10 fingers. That's also Haribol. Yeah, that's a real Haribol. Yeah. Whenever Lord Nityananda looked at a devotee, They were infused with overwhelming Krishna prema and fell to the ground, fainting. Everyone became omniscient. Every word they spoke became true. They all magically became beautiful like Cupid. So, it says, he was there 3 months, but what he did in 1 hour would be impossible for someone to narrate completely. So there you go, devotees. In this way, Lord Nityananda returned and began or restarted. Well, he restarted the Sankirtan movement, but he began the Namahata movement, because they had not really been having exactly Namahatas. Not so much when Lord Chaitanya was there, but when Lord Nityananda returned, then he really instituted the Namahata program, going out, traveling out with Harinam and doing Harinam somewhere, and then establishing a regular program in that place. Yeah, so anyway, we can talk about that more tomorrow, I guess. But that's how Lord Nityananda returned to Navadvip. And really, the Namahata movement just developed tremendously. Hare Krishna. Sri Nityananda Prabhu Ke. Sri Nityananda Prabhu Ke. Sri Nityananda Prabhu Ke. Srila Prabhupada Ke. Go Premanande.